story that I'm going to be focusing on mostly tonight is the Middle East. We're going to be talking about Iran, Israel, the U.S., the ceasefire that President Trump was speaking about today, some fiery language, I might add. Live look at Jerusalem, where we, of course, for quite some time, we were watching for missiles being intercepted above Israeli metros. Well, now that there's a ceasefire in effect, we don't expect to see anything of that sort. It is about 5:16 Israel Standard Time right now. Dr. Alon Burstein is standing by. Alon has been with me basically for the entirety of this saga, as we've covered it basically from Israel striking Iran to Iran retaliating, leading up to the U.S.'s strikes on Saturday. And now we stand here today alone in a ceasefire. Are both sides, as of this hour, abiding by it?
Good to see you, Austin. I'm always hesitant to say as of this hour, yes, because it is right about now that is 5 a.m. in Israel, slightly different time in Iran, and this is usually the time for the last 12 days that the sides were firing at each other. So far at this moment, it does seem like that. Throughout the day, since the declared time of the ceasefire, we did have Iran fire 3 missiles. 2 of them did not even actually make it. Some say they didn't make it past Jordan. 1 was en route and was intercepted. We then had Israel's retaliation that I presume we'll talk about later, when Trump basically ordered Israel to withdraw the planes. And since then, we have had at least 2 drones, some reports say 4 drones, that were launched by Iran that have been intercepted by Israel. No one's really talking about the fact that that was also a violation of the ceasefire, because drones are relatively easy to intercept. We saw this last year in April when drones were sent as part of Iran's initial attack. So at this point, that seems like Iran is sort of like just trying to poke the bear a little bit, but no one's really talking about that as a big violation of the ceasefire. It's seen as something that's almost expected in the lunacy of the Middle East right now.
So we've got these images of Fordow before and after. This has been one of the central focuses of this conflict alone as time has gone on. One thing that we also have video of are the B-2 bombers that were involved in this military action. They flew from Missouri to Iran and then back to Missouri to get this thing done. Well, we're learning more about the extent of the damage. U.S. intelligence report is suggesting that Iran's nuclear program has only been set back by only a few months after those strikes by the U.S. They say that it was not completely and fully obliterated, as President Trump has previously said. That's according to 2 people familiar with the early assessment, telling the Associated Press. Alon, what are you reading about the damage that was done in Iran? Do we know where their capabilities stand at this point?
So at this point, we have no definitive proof. The leaders of the attacking sides, both Netanyahu and Trump, are saying that Iran's nuclear program has been defeated. Trump saying it much more decisively, saying that the sites are completely destroyed. Netanyahu is saying that the nuclear program has been destroyed to aspiration. He's not talking so much about specific sites. He did mention Natanz and Isfahan. Did not mention Fordow specifically, because Israel is not the one that attacked Fordow. Both the leaders are saying that the sites are destroyed and the nuclear capabilities are destroyed. Intelligence communities so far, the only assessments that are coming out are a lot more skeptical. Some are talking about the fact that Fordow was not actually destroyed, but the entrances were destroyed and Iran can rebuild it. Some are saying that Iran may have actually removed a lot of its nuclear materials, the enriched uranium, and even some of the centrifuges from Fordow. Look, there's a couple of things that no one's disputing. No one's disputing that the other nuclear sites, if we put Fordow aside for a second, no one's disputing that Natanz, Isfahan, the main research facilities in Tehran, the heavy water plant in Iraq, no one's disputing that those were heavily hit. More than that, Natanz was the largest and most important nuclear site. You and I were speaking when the attack was launched, and then there were attacks in Tehran, and I kept on saying, unless we see attacks in Natanz, it's not serious. And then there were massive bombings in Natanz again and again and again. Now, one of the important facets of Natanz is not only that there was a lot of enriched uranium there and some 15,000 centrifuges that Iran was using to enrich uranium, but that after the attacks, the IAEA, the International Atomic Agency, reported that it saw an increase in radioactive activity in that site. That means that there was significant damage that was done. I'm not saying that's a good thing to have radioactive activity, but that does tell us there was significant damage that was done to that site. I would bet that Natanz is far more destroyed than Fordo necessarily. Also, the international agency has not seen any such radioactive signals from Fordo. Iran is saying that it did remove all of its nuclear capabilities and nuclear material from the sites that were attacked. It doesn't say which sites. They've said from the sites. But realistically speaking, Fordo is the one where they would have been able to remove the material because the attacks there only came later. The attacks in Natanz and in Iraq came in the first hours of the initial Israeli attack. So they wouldn't have had time to do that. So, you know, an educated guess at this point would say that certainly Natanz, Isfahan, and Iraq are badly damaged, if not destroyed. Fordo, possibly destroyed or badly damaged, but did that actually stop the nuclear capabilities, or sorry, again, the nuclear program that was happening there? That is still up for grabs and a question mark.
So, how are the Israelis reacting to this, and why were we seeing angry posts by President Trump earlier today? I know that ceasefires, as you and I have learned covering the Israel-Hamas war, sometimes ceasefires aren't perfect. Do I have that right? Is that a little bit of what we saw earlier today?
So there's a couple of different things with regards to that question, or two questions. How is Israel seeing this, and Trump's anger? I'm going to start from how Israel or Israelis are seeing this. This has been quite an experience, I would say, for Israelis, because most people in Israel have not experienced a war with a country. In the last decades, the wars that Israel's been embroiled in have been with Palestinians, they've been with Hezbollah, they've been with militias in Iraq and in Syria, even militias in Yemen. The Houthis had fired similar ballistic missiles. They fire one missile a day or every couple of days, not the barrages that Iran was capable of firing. 1-ton missiles landing in the streets of Israel, something that most Israelis do not remember. So, for most Israelis, the last 12 days has been, on the one hand, a bit of an eye opener with regards to the possible carnage that such a war can bring about. On the other hand, there's also a big sense of accomplishment, in the sense that Iran has always been Israel's big bad enemy. It was the one that sponsors the local regional terrorism, is the head of the snake. I mean, what hasn't been said about it? And really, those initial strikes that Israel carried out, assassinating almost the entire top leadership of Iran's military, assassinating the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, taking out a lot of the nuclear sites and a lot of the missile capabilities. The Israeli Air Force was really in control of Tehran and Iranian airspace for over 12 days. So there's a lot of sense of accomplishment with the Mossad and the Israeli Air Force. In terms of at home, though, in Israel, there's also a sense of, I think, some bewilderness and shock of what war can actually bring about. That's in terms of how Israelis are seeing it. I think they're seeing it as accomplishment, but also there's a bit of shock that now everyone's waking up to. But in terms of Trump and that ceasefire, I think what we saw here really is, again, the difference between when two countries are at war with each other and when a country and a terror group are fighting each other or are at war with each other. Typically in the United States, and I've said this every time you and I have been on, and there's been a ceasefire or a temporary ceasefire or a truce that was declared between Israel and Hamas or Israel and Hezbollah. Usually it's set for a specific time. And I always tell you, it's going to happen. And then 15 minutes later to half an hour later, you're going to see the terror group launch a missile or a rocket, because that, unfortunately, is standard practice. It's now saying, we have signed a ceasefire. I'm going to do one more thing that I have deniability for. What are you going to do? I get to say that I fired the last shot. Are you going to break the ceasefire for that? Now, here we had almost something similar. Iran did fire those missiles all of a sudden at Israel, but all of a sudden, Trump saw Israel's response and got enraged. He got enraged because Israel's response was going to be such a harsh retaliation that could have just collapsed the ceasefire once again. And I think from Trump's perspective, we saw two things. First, Trump saw Iran's retaliation to the United States, attacking the U.S. base in Qatar, and he was able to swallow that. He was able to see, and we haven't seen Trump in a lot of wars necessarily when the United States is attacked, but we can all imagine that Trump, for all the American pride and the pride he has in the military, doesn't like to see U.S. bases attacked. The fact that he was able to say, I'm going to swallow that. I'm going to even say thank you to Iran for telling me in advance about that and making sure that they actually toned down their attack. I mean, imagine if this was under Biden, what Trump would say about that. But the fact that he was able to say, thank you, I'll accept that now and go to ceasefire, I think that he felt that he swallowed a lot of his pride in order to bring about a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. And then to see an Israeli harsh retaliation for what he said, the missile that didn't even hit anything, was intercepted on the way. Israel should have just absorbed that and didn't. I think that's where we saw that fury. And yeah, like you said, language that we don't typically hear a U.S. president using, and particularly with regards to Israel within the region, calling Israel pretty much the villain in a situation that could have deteriorated.
Let's play this really quick. Let's watch.
You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
So what was your reaction when you heard that?
Well, first, I laughed. I have to admit, because again, I was not expecting that when I saw that live. I was like, oh wow. Like again, we all know, when we've talked about this many times, that Trump is emotional when it comes to diplomacy, but that even for him is unexpected and really shows how much he cared about the situation at that moment and how angry he was that when he saw himself again bringing, he calls it a peace. This is not a peace. There's no peace between Israel and Iran, but bringing a ceasefire and the two sides just agree to calm things down between, again, the two biggest mortal enemies in the region right now, to bring them back to a calm. I think he felt a great accomplishment and then saw that breaking down. I think that was a purely emotional reaction. I will add also that the reason that he was very angry with Israel was that once the ceasefire was declared, it was declared that it was going to take effect within 12 hours. Israel saw that as an opportunity. There were 12 hours. Okay, that means that we have to actually now, if we want to take out any more targets, they have to happen now. And even before the ceasefire went into effect, Israel launched a massive air raid in Tehran. And that Trump got really angry at. And that was an interesting situation for Israel, because as far as Israel was concerned, it did no wrong. The ceasefire had not taken effect yet. So it should actually try to carry out these attacks. But Trump was also very angry about that because he wanted this almost as an honor situation. And he said, we just declared a ceasefire. Why are you now launching the largest airstrike? Are you trying to derail this? And I think he was hurt. I think he was actually offended and hurt. He felt that he went in and attacked Fordo, attacked Natanz, and he did this, I don't need to tell you, amidst a lot of opposition within his own political party. And he did this anyway. I'm not going to say he did this for Israel necessarily, but certainly with the encouragement of Israel. And I think that he wanted a gesture back. He wanted to see back that when he declared a ceasefire, Israel just immediately, okay, is willing to silence the guns. And I think he was just really angry at that prospect. And the last thing I'll say, what's very interesting to see is what is going to be the next step, both vis-a-vis Iran and vis-a-vis Hamas, because there's now two negotiations that are going to start. The ceasefire between Israel and Iran right now is basically a, quote unquote, gentleman's agreement. There is no actual document. There's no terms as to what happened. Both sides just agreed to calm down, and Iran and the United States are theoretically going to go back now to negotiate. So what's going to happen now, especially when Trump is angry at Israel and wants Iran to just calm down also? That's one. Two, as we saw also from those reactions, Trump feels that he went out of his way to help Israel in Israel's mission. And he said repeatedly, no other country could have done this. We did what no other country could do. He was, I think, implying Israel launched the war in Iran, we're going to finish it. And now we might well feel that he has, and he now is owed a favor from Israel if he wants to come and say, now it's time for you to sign a treaty with Hamas and end the war in Gaza. Something's going to be very difficult for Netanyahu politically. It's very interesting. Those two negotiations are going to be coming up within the next week or two, and we're going to see how Trump feels vis-a-vis Israel and Netanyahu's government.
My final question for you tonight is about the negotiations. In light of everything that's happened, does it feel like the diplomatic route is feeling more realistic than it has previously? We know that they negotiated, the U.S. officials and Iranian officials, they negotiated for 60 days. On the 61st day is when the IDF carried out its initial strikes against Iran. Now that we stand here today on Tuesday at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, does it feel like the diplomatic route is more likely than it has been as of late?
I think that, yes, for sure. But Iran is not necessarily going to be as defeated as we see it right now when it comes to negotiations, because Iran, there's no way to slice it. There's no other way to look at it. Iran is the one who lost the military engagement here. It was bombed again by Israel. It had this whole plan of to have a massive retaliation to Israel's initial attack and therefore deter Israel. That failed completely. Its main its main symbols of power were attacked, and a lot of symbolic things were attacked. Israel bothered to carry an airstrike and bomb out Iran. Had a very famous clock in the middle of Tehran that was the countdown to Israel's destruction. That has now been destroyed by the Israeli Air Force. So that, alongside obviously the attacks on nuclear sites by the United States, there's no doubt that militarily Iran was defeated, or not defeated, but at least is the one who did not come out on top in this engagement on the one hand. On the other hand, Iran, according to what it's saying, and maybe the intelligence community is implying that they're not necessarily wrong, still has the capability to enrich uranium, may have even moved some of the nuclear materials. And more than that, they are seeing again and again that even though Trump is willing to engage in war, he does not necessarily want it. And now, even though the military option that Israel has shown that it can carry out is a credible threat, Iran also knows that Israel will not necessarily be able to carry that out again amidst Trump's anger. So I do think we'll be seeing another round of negotiations. I think that Iran is likely going to be a lot more flexible when it comes to the possible terms, but I don't think that we will necessarily see them saying, Trump at some point had tweeted unconditional surrender. I don't think we're going to see them just agreeing to everything, because while they do not necessarily have the military capability to fight off Israel, to fight off the United States, diplomatically, they still see that Trump did not let Israel just run amok for as long as it wanted. Trump also carried out those airstrikes, very important airstrikes, but limited airstrikes, and then quickly tried to say, now it's time for peace. They're going to be using that to their advantage to say, we'll give you the peace you want, but we're not just bowing down and accepting all of your terms. So it's going to be interesting to see the negotiations. Again, they've proven to not have the military capability to withstand attacks, but diplomatically, they've not been defeated.
We'll be following up soon, Alon. Alon has his own YouTube channel for anybody who wants to give him a follow. He posts his own Middle East updates. Alon, as always, good to see you. See you soon.